Philosophy 212, Ethics in Business and Society. Perspectives, Principles, and Values. In this presentation, we will look at how to analyze cases from 4 different perspectives using the principles and values associated with each perspective. To begin, consider the following hypothetical example. Case 1. John is an employee of Widget Corporation. A week ago, he took home a box of copy paper from work for personal use. So far, no one has said anything. Did John do the right thing? Why or why not? Using principles and values associated with each perspective, we can answer these questions. In doing so, we are analyzing the case and forming a value judgment about John's behavior and decision-making. There are 4 major perspectives from which we can analyze a case. A perspective is a point of view. It is a way of looking at things. Each perspective has a principle and values associated with it. Before we turn to each perspective, let's see what principles and values are and how they relate to one another. A principle is a guideline for behavior. It is a rule. Principles help us to make our own decisions and to evaluate the decisions of others. For example, do not steal is a principle. We can put the principle in other words, such as stealing is wrong, or thou shalt not steal, to use the King James English. Principles protect, promote, and encourage certain values. What then is a value? A value is something that matters. It is something important. The principle do not steal protects the value of property. Property matters to people. It is important to them. To take another classic example, the principle do not kill protects the value of life. There are many principles and values. We will encounter others as we move through this course. As said, there are 4 perspectives from which one may analyze a case or issue. These are the self-interest perspective, the business perspective, the legal perspective, and the ethical perspective. I will discuss each of these in turn, applying them to our hypothetical case. After we have touched on each perspective, I will summarize the main ideas. First, we have the perspective of self-interest. This perspective asks the question, what's in it for me? The principle used to guide your behavior is, do what is in your best interest. The value being promoted is your own well-being or happiness. So, for our hypothetical case involving John, we can ask, is John's action in his best interest? If so, then it is the right thing to do. If not, then it is not. We might ask, what are the risks of getting caught, and what might happen to John if he were caught? But if he gets away with his action, and he is not bothered by his decision, then we might just say that John did the right thing, for himself at least. We should note a few things. In real life, cases will usually be more complex than such a hypothetical one as we are looking at, which is used for illustration purposes. Also, it is important to realize that acting in your self-interest is not the same as doing what you want. What you want is not always in your self-interest, even if you think it is. The next perspective is business. What is business? Business is a commercial or industrial enterprise. That is, the making, marketing, selling, and distribution of stuff that people want. Business is also a word to describe dealings or transactions of an economic nature. That is, trade. Generally speaking, the goal of a business. Thus, the principle of the business perspective is maximize profits. The value being promoted is money, also known as wealth or capitalism. This is where the word capitalism comes from. So, we can ask whether John's choice is right from the perspective of business. In this example, the business would be John's employer, Widget Corporation. John's taking the paper for personal use would be a cost to the company with no gain to compensate. So, from the business perspective, John's behavior is wrong. We see here where there could be what we can call a conflict of interest, since John's actions might be right from one perspective, his self-interest, but wrong from another, that of his business. Next is the legal perspective. The principle of this perspective is obey the law, and the value being promoted is rule of law or legal justice. I realize this probably sounds abstract. That is because we are dealing with a high-level principle. But we can focus on a lower-level principle. In our hypothetical case, that principle would be the law against stealing. This law is meant to protect the value of property. Since John's action breaks the law against stealing, from the legal perspective, John's action is wrong. Finally, we come to the ethical perspective. The ethical perspective says that we should do the right thing. That is its principle. The value being protected and promoted is moral justice or righteousness. Like the legal principle, this ethical principle is very high level and thus quite abstract. But a lower level principle that applies to our hypothetical case is similar to the lower level legal principle we just mentioned. Do not steal. But here, we are talking about stealing being ethically wrong, not just legally wrong. The same pattern applies, however. Since John's actions violate the principle, do not steal, then John's action is ethically wrong. He should not do it. Once again, revisiting our hypothetical example, we can ask whether John's behavior and decision-making is right or wrong from 4 different perspectives. This allows us to answer these questions. Did John do the right thing? Why or why not? In saying why or why not, we are providing reasons from a particular perspective. That is, we are applying principles and values to answering this question. The last slide of this lecture summarizes many of the ideas that have been presented. Here we see each perspective and its related principles and values. We will be using these perspectives throughout the course to analyze specific cases and more general issues as we explore ethics in business and society.